Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Senate Committee on Commerce and Labor for the 81st Legislative Session. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Hardy. Here. Senator Lang. Senator Neal. Senator Pickard. Here. Senator Scheibel. Senator Settlemeyer. Here. Chair Spearman.
Here. And please mark the other members present as they arrive. Thank you so much. I think everyone knows the housekeeping rules by now. Check your phones, make sure nothing's going to go bling, boom, or anything else. Cry, holla, mama, daddy, whatever. So we don't disturb the folks who are testifying. And for those who are waiting on the phone, please make sure that you pay attention to which side we're on, whether it's support or whether we're talking about opposition or neutral. And your telephone number, you will be called by the last three digits of your telephone number. So I think we are ready to rock and roll. I see Assemblywoman Peters here. We're going to look at Assembly Bill 280 this morning. Welcome to the dais and welcome to this side of the legislative process. Relating to public restrooms and requires places of public accommodation in buildings leased on behalf of single-stall restroom to the public to make the single-stall restroom as inclusive as accessible as possible. Thank you, ma'am. You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here on a Saturday to hear this bill. I appreciate the opportunity to present this to you. I have extended remarks for today, but I'm going to cut it down and simply say that this bill, Assembly Bill 280, just requires that in the state of Nevada, if we have a single stall bathroom that is open to the public, that it be non-gendered or non-gender specific. I know there are a number of people in this building who have taken a look at the line to a restroom and have chose the other gendered restroom because of convenience sake, right? And it doesn't appear to matter. Sometimes it's because the men's line is not as long as the women's line. However, there are situations, like in my case, I have a son. When I go to pull him into the women's restroom, sometimes he goes, "No, Mom, I don't want to go in the women's restroom." And so this bill is really about dignity and the ability for people to just go to the restroom without concern of what it looks like to be using that restroom. We did in the assembly add a couple of things to the first draft of this bill, including a grace period, so folks have an opportunity to get these signs installed. That is extended to February 1st of 2022. And then we also allocated some funds to the State Parks Division to install those signs on state parks restrooms. I am open for any questions.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Do you have the page and the line number where those additions are? Yeah.
Yes, so they're in the second reprint, and those are in section 15.2, that's the appropriation, and section 15.5 is the grace, subsection 3 is the grace period.
And the page?
I'm sorry, that would be page 12.
Okay. All righty. Committee, questions? Senator Settlemeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just curious that there was some discussion from other people, probably previous rendition or beliefs of the bill, but this does not require the purchasing or building of any additional bathrooms. This is just indicating that if you have a single stall, just to put appropriate signage, that it can be utilized by all.
Thank you for the question, Sarah Peters, for the record. Absolutely. So this bill is strictly about signage. It requires no retrofit. It requires no construction obligation. And the future obligation for municipalities is just making sure that any installed single-stall bathroom has the non-gendered signage.
Okay. If I could continue on, Madam Chair, I was also curious about the situation where some of the accommodations that have been built many years ago would have male and female, but the male bathroom has a urinal. Would they have to retrofit or take out the urinal in that particular situation, or do they also have to then let both sexes to that one, or can they just say, because it has a urinal, we're leaving it as just male?
Thank you for the question, Sarah Peters, for the record. We had some discussion about this in the early stages of the draft. Because bathrooms are not exclusive to using for defecation, right? People may want to go wash their hands or powder their nose or just need a place to cry. We did decide that even a restroom with just a urinal or a restroom with both a toilet and a urinal would still be non-gendered. I mean, people can decide whether that's going to work for them or not, but it's to me that's not necessarily a limiting of the space to people who would generally use a toilet rather than a urinal.
Okay, last question. So then, should we amend the bill stating that all bathrooms built in the future have to have a urinal to be equal?
Assemblywoman Peters, for the record, I don't believe that's necessary. I think, especially having a husband and a son, they function just fine with just a toilet.
Just asking.
Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing the bill to the extent that this is something we've dealt with for, well, as long as I was in construction development, going on 30 years. I've built many facilities with a single stall alongside, usually adjacent to, the standard multi-stall restrooms for men and women. And in each case, over the 30 years, we didn't assign that to a particular gender. Does this, and usually the sign would have some diagram of a male and a female with a line between them, and then often they would say family restroom or something to that effect. Does this bill require those signs to be changed, or are those sufficient?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Peters. For the record, those would be sufficient. The only requirement here is for single-gendered signs.
Okay, and that's what I'm kind of driving at, because those are not single-gendered. They go with the long-standing biology male-female, right? Mm-hmm. But it's indicating that both are acceptable in that room. In fact, many of the signs say family, which would include everybody, right? Because we're all part of a family at some point. So I'm trying to get the distinction between what this bill requires in terms of non-gender, because you don't, like a bill that we saw recently where they actually showed us the sign that they were looking at. This bill doesn't. So describe for me, if you would, what the sign looks like and how it differs from the present sign.
Thank you for the question. Assemblywoman Peters, for the record, I worked with LCB to try and make this language as broad as possible, while also ensuring that the point was made that restrooms should be accessible by all genders in the single stall case. So we included in here, shall not label the single stall restroom with gendered signage, meaning single gendered, but may label, right? So even no label would be fine. May label, including without limitation, all gender bathroom or all accessible bathroom. So we tried to make this very broad and really only exclude those signs that are specific to a single gender.
All right, I appreciate that, because that's important, right? A lot of businesses, particularly those that are trying to be sensitive and politically correct, if they read the language the way I did, not to say that's the only way to read it, obviously, but if they read it the way I did, it means, oh, I got to change all the labels because my labels show genders. What I hear you saying is that as long as it's both genders, that's acceptable so that they don't have to go through the expense. And if that's the case, then are we requiring at state parks, because typically those are single use restrooms, that now all restrooms at state parks are going to be non-assigned, because I know that there's typically one for men and one for women, because what I hear, and in fact I've heard it from my colleagues, they don't want to go into a restroom where someone has lifted the seat, okay? And that makes a difference. And so what that'll do to them is it'll mean all bets are off. They have no restroom because all the seats are put up, because it's all gender neutral. So how do we accommodate those people as well? Because I think they're equally as important and deserving of respect.
Thank you for that specific question. Sarah Peters, for the record. I don't think that the current scenario where people arbitrarily don't follow the signage limits that particular scenario from happening. And I know in the case of this building, right, when we go into the restroom, the women's restroom, the toilet seats are up right now because they're cleaning so frequently. So I just don't see that as being a statutory solution problem. That's kind of more of a practical human interaction problem. And I also had the conversation with our state parks. I've not been to a state park that didn't have non-gendered bathrooms. And thinking about Sand Harbor, all of their single stall bathrooms, which they've retrofitted most of their bathrooms to be, are non-gendered anyways. So I don't see that as being a hugely problematic issue.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think you hit the nail on the head that, you know, we're talking about a lot of different scenarios, and everybody's going to approach it a little differently, and I'm trying to make sure that we're respecting everyone, including those that, you know, and in this case, the women who don't want to go into the restroom that's been used by the man for obvious reasons. It means they have to clean the toilet before they use it, and they don't want to do that, and if we make all of them essentially potentially men's rooms, they have no option at that point. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of explore that a little bit. I appreciate where you're going, and I appreciate putting on the record that we don't have to retrofit those that don't meet the explicit requirements of the signage as it's described in here, as long as it's intended that both genders or all genders can use it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Hardy, then Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. More an observation. So we took a road trip to Markleyville a week ago, and they have a restroom, which is used to be called an outhouse, but it's made of plastic now, and there are no genders on outhouses and facilities, I'll call them. And when we start looking at the United States of America, we have a different expectation than we did in France, where we were in two lines and there was an iron bar that was a pipe between the stalls and the urinals en masse. And then in Central America, there were no seats. It was just the toilet. So we have a different sensibility, and it sounds like you're sensitive to that sensibility. And at the same time, I think it's wise that we not punish women for having a longer line. I think if there's one thing that probably irritates more than anything is the reality of a longer line. And so this is probably, as I see it, something that's going to not eventually be limited to public buildings. Is that how you're seeing it, the eventuality of it?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Peters. For the record, this is not limited to public restrooms. This is for every publicly available restroom in the state. And I did have early discussions with the Retail Association and the Resort Association about whether they would have issue with this bill. And the response I received was, this is best practice. There are not a lot of retail association or retail or resort places or even boutique bars that have gendered restrooms anymore. And it's more commonplace now to just accept that lines are problematic, and letting people go where they need to go is the most important fact of having restrooms, publicly available restrooms.
So this is single stall issue.
Single stall, absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Neal.
I think Senator Settlemyre had something, follow-up.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and Chair. His question brought up a situation I've run into where you may have a single stall, but they had 3 urinals. So in that situation, do they have to, you understand the question there. I would agree if it's single stall, single urinal, make it, available for everybody. But if you get into a situation where bars, a lot of times, tend to have a lot of people that have to use a urinal for some reason, and in that respect, they may have 3 urinals, but only one just so we have it on the record, what your intent is.
Thank you for the scenario, Sarah Peters, for the record. I'm going to direct you, if I may, to section 9, sub 4. C, single stall restroom means a restroom that is intended for an individual use and contains a single toilet or a single urinal, or a toilet and a urinal. So in the case of multiple urinals, that wouldn't qualify as a single stall.
So, Madam Chair, can I ask? Okay, thanks. So there's a couple of things, right? I had questions on section 4, well, really section 4, section 5, where a person is guilty of a misdemeanor if they will hold, deny, deprive, or attempt to withhold access for section 1. So in real life, how does this play out, right? So couple of thoughts that went into my mind, right? So I was in California, and I was at a conference and had an all-gender bathroom. First of all, the signage on the bathroom confused me, and I didn't know which bathroom I was supposed to use, because I was like, what is this? Like, what's the sign? Like, is this for me? Because I have an uncomfortability going into a bathroom that was prior used by a man. I don't like it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to have to wipe the seat down. I don't want to have to figure out who left the stall up. I just want to go into the bathroom that's designated for a woman, right? And so when I think about like what's going on in the world and how people are responding to what's happening, how is a person supposed to know that that access was denied? Is access denied because there's failure to have signage? Is there access denied because there's failure to direct me to the appropriate place? What triggers the misdemeanor?
That's a really good question, Assemblywoman Peters, for the record. And not being a lawyer, I don't feel like I can speak necessarily to that. I would ask the chair if her legal staff may be open to responding.
Yeah, thank you. I was just getting ready to ask Mr. Keene if he would respond to that.
Thank you, Chair Spearman. For the record, Will Keene, Committee Counsel. The first several sections of the bill, including Section 4, they all amend the Public Accommodations Statute, Chapter 651, and that enforcement provision in Chapter 651.080 has been around since the mid-'60s. There may be a problem of fact sometimes showing who's depriving someone of a right, but there's a large body of case law enforcing the public accommodations rules that's been building since the 60s. And this would fit in with the other public accommodation rules. And there's some obvious cases that you could imagine where somebody refuses, or has a bouncer at a bar who refuses to let people into a bathroom unless they're of a particular gender. There are more subtle ways, but I would think it'd be the case law that's built up over time since the 60s with regard to public accommodations.
So, Senator Spearman, can I ask Mr. Keene another question? So does this trigger or open us into a civil rights action? I mean, are we now coming under a Title II 1964 where now you can then allege and find yourself in federal court for denial of access?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Will Keene, Committee Counsel. This is just amending state law, so this would not affect any federal law action that you might or might not have. But this is creating a new protection in state law in Nevada.
So, but typically under public accommodations, where do you file suit? Is it state court? Is it under a discrimination? Does it go to NERC? What's the trigger here? Because what's the response? So when I'm thinking about single stall bathrooms, which typically are more in small businesses. So when I think about like, there's this place it's like outside of my district, and they have like, it's like a vegan place, but it's a single stall bathroom that just says bathroom, right? Just says restroom. It doesn't indicate anything because of the size of the space, it's just one bathroom. So what then happens if they're like, well, I just have the one sign and yeah, everybody can use it, but I don't have this signage? Are they then served and now there's a suit around the signage of the bathroom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Bill Keene, Committee Counsel. I think we have two questions here. One is what sort of signage would violate the provisions, and it seems to me that the provisions in Section 1, which are largely repeated throughout the bill, they don't require a particular kind of signage. You don't have to have a particular sign as long as the bathroom is available for both genders, if it meets these qualifications, if it's a single stall bathroom. As far as the second question about how it's enforced, the provisions of the Public Accommodations Law this is actually pretty interesting, that the state has specifically authorized county and city governments to adopt ordinances to enforce these provisions and set it up so that if the county or city has done so and is enforcing the provision, then the state will not also enforce it. However, if the county or city does not do that, then the state can enforce it, or people are allowed to file with NERC, which, as you know, ultimately can lead to private rights of action, depending on how that all works out with the NERC investigation.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. Just another quick question. So is this setting the minimum or the maximum? So can the county be more restrictive or the city be more restrictive, or is this just the minimum threshold that the state is putting in, but the county can go further?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Committee Counsel. I don't think that the particular provision is in the bill, but what it is, the particular provision at issue is NRS 651.100, and it specifically says that the local governments are authorized to adopt ordinances, but such ordinance cannot be broader in scope, so they cannot cover things that are not covered by Chapter 651, and the punishments cannot be more severe. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And then so then going back to Section 5 sub C, where this is the punishing or attempts to punish any other person for exercising or attempting to exercise any right or privilege or access to Section 1 of this act. So in this case, when we read any other person for exercising or attempting to exercise any right, so is this now an extension to not just the person who was attempting to use the bathroom, but any other person who may be with the person? I mean, there's a couple of scenarios. You have parent guardian, which is entirely different, where the parent has every right to be in the space to defend their child. But then you have the person to person, where I'm the friend, and then the friend is there, and they're saying, well, I feel like the business was attempting to punish us for asking about the signage. What's the lineage of the rights, and how does it extend down the path? Is this now rights of others? Because the way I read that, it extends beyond the individual who simply was denied. It extends to a person who could have been engaged in exercising for another person.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Committee Counsel. So as we're looking at NRS 651.090 as it's in Section 5, the case law may expand upon this point, but just looking at the plain language, what we have here are anybody who's been denied a right this is a little bit confusing because the language uses person in two different senses. At the top, when you look at page 4, line 33, they talk about any person who. That's the person who's doing the depriving, who's doing the attempting to withhold, et cetera, or intimidation. And then embedded in paragraphs A, B, and C, for example, on page 4, line 35, the person referred to there is the person who's trying to exercise a right that they're guaranteed. So to expand upon your hypothetical, so if there were a person, and Section 1 mentions, for example, that if you have a caregiver who's been designated pursuant to Chapter 449A, you should be able to enter the bathroom with your caregiver. And so the caregiver has a right under the statute as well to be able to enter. And if someone is, it could be really anybody, is trying to prevent your caregiver from entering into the bathroom with you, your caregiver would have an action here because they have a protected right. Someone who's a bystander, who's offended by what's going on, may not. It doesn't look to me like the plain language would cover that person. But a parent with a child, if they attempt to prevent the child from going in, the child is protected. So I hope that I'm happy to run through more hypotheticals if you'd like. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. I was just trying to see what the extension was because of public accommodation and whether or not it extended to bystander and other persons. I mean, so I'm just trying to understand like what a business is getting into when you throw this into public accommodations, and then what rights and duties are triggered, and then what they have to defend against. Because this would be, although you said it's being inserted into the case law, the defense to me is slightly different because of the issue. And so what I'm trying to figure out is, are we giving equal weight to bathroom access as to a racial incident where you were denied access to a bathroom, right? Gender and race. Gender doesn't have the same hierarchy as race. Gender is not seen the same way. When constitutional practices, gender is viewed with intermediate scrutiny. And so in certain circumstances, this could be a rational basis test, right? Or this could be something else. And the question is, I'm trying to figure out what is being triggered here so that it's super clear that this bill walks out the door and a business knows what they then have to defend and what they then have to prove in terms of circumstances. I get what's being played here, but I also understand that there's, and this may be offensive to some people, there's hypersensitivity that's going on, right? And so you're being thrown into situations and you're like, holy smokes, I now have a federal freaking lawsuit against me for not having signage on this. And so I'm trying to figure out what's the timeline that this has to be triggered, and a person has to, because I see October 1st for sections 1, 2, 3, 6, and 13, and then February 1st, 2022. So this passes in October. What's my window that I can then put this signage up and I'm not subject to suit as a business? Because I think these are legitimate concerns. Regardless of the intent of the policy, I think there are legitimate concerns with how this shakes out in the real world.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Will Keene, Committee Counsel. With regard to strict scrutiny or intermediate scrutiny tests or rational basis, those would apply when a statute is being challenged. So, and you're exactly correct. If there's a statute which is being challenged as being discriminatory on the basis of race, the standard that would apply to uphold such a statute would be strict scrutiny. And for gender, it's an intermediate scrutiny, so that if a statute being challenged as being unconstitutional because it discriminated against somebody based on their gender, there'd be a lower level of examination known as the intermediate scrutiny. And then, as you also know, for most laws, it's rational basis when there's no kind of protected class or right. But with regard to this statute here in Section 5, it does treat all these various kind of claims the same in that they are all violations of state law. There's no increased standard for discrimination based on race versus discrimination based on gender usage of bathroom. There's no increased penalty. So on a certain level, those are all treated the same as far as being enforced by this statute. And as far as the effective date goes, so the way that this bill was set up, the three provisions which provide for enforcement have been delayed in effective date until February 1st of 2022. Those are the criminal enforcement provisions. And I don't believe that the authorization to file a complaint with NERC is in the bill. So this is what would happen. So on October 1st of 2021, all the provisions except for sections 4, 5, and 14, which are the criminal enforcement provisions, all those other provisions would go into effect. And on or before that date, everybody who's covered by this, including all the places of public accommodation, should change their signage. And if they do not, they have effectively until February 1st of 2022 to change the signage. And during that grandfather period or window of opportunity of about 5 months, they will not be subject to any criminal penalties. However, the NERC provision would apply starting on October 1st of 2021.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator, let me go with Senator Scheibel first, and Senator Pickett for the second time.
Thank you. And I appreciate you bringing the bill. Just, a quick comment. I think that it is past time that we do this in places of public accommodation. It doesn't sound overly burdensome to me. And so my question is whether you encountered a lot or any opposition to this bill. Are there businesses that are, for lack of a better term, freaking out about these new requirements?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Peters. For the record, no.
Thank you. And my second question is that I've also, I've been in public restrooms, and a lot of places use like cutesy little signs that are maybe gendered or not gendered, and have aliens on them and animals and things like that. And would those signs still be able to comply with this, with the terms of this bill?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Peters. For the record, yes, absolutely. And I even imagined in our universities, the art students could get together and do signage that, in childcare facilities, that children could decorate the signage if they wanted to. The opportunities for creativity are endless under this provision.
And then would that even open the opportunity to designate bathrooms by, and I want to make sure that I'm being clear, that I'm not talking about making it discriminatory in other ways. And I do take this issue seriously, but also understand that we're talking about preschools and restaurants and anywhere in the world. And so could we use like other designations, like this is the bathroom for people who put the seat up. This is the bathroom for people who put the seat back down, as in keep all your bathrooms clean. Or could you have, like, for children, silly designations? These are for people who like cheese pizza. These are for like people who like pepperoni pizza. Does this prohibit businesses from engaging in those practices as long as they're not separating people by actual gender?
Thank you for the question. And again, I am not a lawyer. Sorry, Sarah Peters for the record. I'm not a lawyer, but my interpretation and intention of the bill is that it be strictly on the single gender signage. So those kinds of silly signs or functional signs or suggestive signs of how to utilize the restroom, I don't feel like they would be prohibited under this bill. I may suggest that we ask legal for clarification and assurance that that's the case under the language.
Yep, Mr. Kane.
Thank you, Chair Spearman. For the record, Will Keene, Committee Counsel. As I read Section 1, subsection 2, paragraph B, starting on page 3, line 18, the key is that the bathroom has to be labeled in a way that includes everybody. And the prohibition earlier in the section is that you can't limit the bathroom to use by any particular person. So silly designations would be fine as long as they're not preventing anybody from using the restroom. So I don't know whether having a restroom that says that you can only use it if you like cheese pizza would, as long as that was just taken as a silly thing and anybody is allowed to use the restroom, it seems like that would be fine.
And if I could just follow up, I think to clarify, my point was that you could use designations that would never be enforceable, to allow children their space for creativity or any other reason. So thank you.
Senator Pickett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The questions have led me down a path in my head where I was thinking about what I had just said about my experience in building facilities. And then it occurred to me when Senator Neal was asking her questions about the practical aspects and enforceability. The International Building Code, International Plumbing Code back in 2018 required the addition of the gender-neutral bathrooms once you get to a certain point, a certain occupancy level. And then it occurred to me that the building codes also require, and they're based on, and these are health and safety standards, right? These are built on decades, if not centuries, of experience in dealing with the practical realities. And then it led me to the idea. I have a favorite restaurant, Indian food, there just down the street from my house. And their occupancy is such that they are required to have 2 restrooms, but they're both single stalls. But the building code requires 1 for men, 1 for women. Does this obviate or displace the building code requirements? How does a new facility come into compliance with both when the building code requires 1 single stall for a man and 1 single stall for a woman? And now we're saying that those single stalls have to be non-gender. Now they cannot meet both standards. How does that work?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Peters, for the record. I'm not familiar enough with the language of building codes to be able to give you an answer right now. I would be happy to follow up upon looking at those to see how these would align.
All right, well, maybe I'll direct this to Mr. Keene, if I may, Madam Chair. Mr. Keene, do you have any insight into, because both the state and the local, whether it's county or municipal jurisdictions, adopt the building code as ordinances. And so we have the force of law in terms of the building codes, and they require gender-specific restrooms, and the number of stalls are based on occupancy. And how would this then, because this is not permissive, this is mandatory, how do we reconcile the two? Do you have any insight into that?
With your permission, Madam Chair, Will Keene, Community Council, Section 9 of the bill addresses the building codes, and it requires the counties, cities, and other government entities that adopt building codes to update their building codes to provide for these single gender, for anybody to be able to use the single stall bathrooms. And therefore, all buildings constructed on or after October 1st of 2021, for buildings that have already been constructed, they're going to have to comply with the rules of this bill. So they're going to have to change their signage if they're public restrooms. And that's the other thing to remember, is this does not apply to private restrooms. But for public restrooms, they would need to comply with this, and the building codes are going to need to be changed. That's what's required by Section 9.
All right, thank you. I'd actually missed sub 2 and sub 3, so appreciate that. That just gives me pause, because those standards are built on decades of health and safety experience. So in any event, thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Lang? Yeah.
Hi, thanks, and I apologize for missing your presentation, but I just have a couple questions. So, I read through this. If you could clarify. So, we're only talking about a bathroom with 1 stall, and how about a bathroom with 1 or 2 urinals and a stall?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Peters, for the record. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Senator Seldmeier had an anecdote for a 3 urinal restroom, and because of the definition we include here for single stall restroom, that would be section 1 on page 3, line 27. Contains a single toilet or a single urinal, or a toilet and a urinal. So in the case of multiple urinals, they would not fall under that single stall restroom definition.
Okay, thank you. And so this would only apply to single stalls. It wouldn't apply to restrooms that have multiple stalls.
That's correct.
Perfect, thank you.
Senator Hardy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've had different experiences. When I was 19 years old, I was in half of the bathrooms in the Reno-Sparks area because my job was to count water fixtures. So I was in every women's bathroom in a business when I was 19 years old between Reno and Sparks. So I walked into a bathroom in a women's bathroom in a service station, and there was this gizmo that I didn't know what it was. It was a female urinal. And so they exist. And so as I read this, how does that comport with the urinal concept? Or it seems to me the way a female urinal is designed, a male could use it. So I just want to make sure that that's somewhere in somebody's head about what that is and where I'm going with this, because theoretically a male should be able to go in there then with this attitude. So my challenge was when I mistakenly entered a multiple stalled bathroom only to discover there were no urinals, and then realized, oh no, I'm in the wrong place. So now have I committed a misdemeanor?
Assemblywoman Peters, for the record, in a multi-stall case, it wouldn't pertain to this bill, I don't believe.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make a couple of statements because I had a range of emotions as we, during your presentation and even in some of the questions. Before 1964, if you drank from a water fountain that was for whites only, is a felony in most of the southern states. As a matter of fact, my first time in the South, Nashville, Tennessee, I was going to take a drink from a water fountain at a Greyhound bus station. And as I opened the door, I saw a white gentleman walk by, and he summoned up a lot of mucus and spit into one of the water fountains. And so I didn't want to use that one. It was nasty. So I went to the other water fountain, and just as I put my hand on the apparatus to turn the water on, my mother grabbed me in the back of my shirt, my dress, and yanked me back. And she yanked me back with such force that I almost hit my mouth on the metal piece. And she was biting her lips and yelling at me, "Do you want to be killed? Do you want to be killed?" I don't think I was 7 yet. And I'm looking at her, and I'm like, what? I'm just trying to drink up. And she said, "I need you to look at those signs. And this one and that one." And the sign that she pointed to was over the water fountain I was getting ready to drink from. And that sign said, "For whites only." And the one where the gentleman spit into the basin, I said, "That is Colo Red, Colo Red." "What does that mean, Mom?" And she said, "It's not Colo Red, it's colored. That's for Negroes. You cannot drink from the fountain or go any place where you see whites. You are not white. You're not white." And to this day, every time I think about that, I can feel my mom yanking me back. And God rest her, she's in heaven now, but I feel her yanking me back and yelling at me. And I couldn't understand why she was so upset. I mean, in my mind, it's water, but okay, you tell me I can't drink? I don't understand why I can't, but if you said don't do it, okay. But what I didn't know was that I didn't know about Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a young, I think he was maybe 14 years old, something like that. And they thought he either whistled at, talked to, something that he did to a white woman that was not allowed. And he was lynched. His body was burned, and he's thrown into the river. And it was such a negative spectacle that when his body was returned to his mother and they had his funeral, they wanted to do a closed casket, and she said, "No. I want the world to see what they have done to my son." And I tell that story because at the time, I knew that if I'd seen you, I knew I'd be a different color. I didn't know it was illegal to be my color. I had no idea. At the time, I knew that I was a girl, and I wasn't real clear that there were some things that girls probably were not supposed to do and would probably be prohibited from doing. I also knew at the time that I was wrestling with my own affectional orientation. And so in a recent interview on PBS, I was asked why I fought so hard for the ERA. And here was my response. When I walk into a room, I am cognizant of the fact that I am a woman, there's discrimination against me for that. I am black, and there's discrimination against me for that. And I am also a member of the LGBTQ community, and there is discrimination against me for that. I've often been asked, which one would I fight hardest for, my civil rights or my rights as a man? I said, don't make me choose. And you're not going to make me choose, because this is all of me. This is all of me. I will never forget being told that there was a place I couldn't go because, quote, white people were afraid I would give them some kind of disease, or anyone who was a Negro or colored will give them the disease. As I've been listening, I've noticed that there are several articles that deal with gender-neutral bathrooms, and more than 160,000 businesses, probably close to 200,000 now, have opted to do that. Yelp has started identifying businesses that have gender-neutral bathrooms, and there are several articles, if you look at Google Scholar, which is a place where a lot of people who are doing research go to, and I think there's probably more than 2,000 articles that deal with it, and it's probably half and half. But I guess what I'm saying, the range of emotions for me were, why am I supposed to choose? And if we're talking about a gender-neutral bathroom and you have other options, I remember walking into a Dairy Queen right outside Montgomery, Alabama, and it was close to the high school that my sister and I were the first to integrate. And my friends crying and my sister yelling, please come out of there. I walked through the front door instead of the back door. So every time when I hear discussions like this, I'm sorry, you all, I cannot help but think about what it felt like, not 7 years old, to be told I couldn't go someplace because people thought something was wrong with me. I may have a different opinion than most of my colleagues, but if businesses are doing it because they know that it's better for the bottom line, or whether they're just doing it for altruistic reasons. There are studies that show that 82% of employers that do this, the people who work for them, when they have other options, they stay because it's a matter of diversity. I don't know how we fix this bill so that everyone, is comfortable with it. I don't know. I don't like, quote, politically correct, but what I do like is being correct about humanity. I will not choose between my gender, my ethnicity, or my affectional orientation, and anything that opposes any one of those. This is all of me. This is who God made me, and I'm proud of it. I ain't gonna choose. I'm not gonna choose. Here's a statement, and I'll make sure that you get this. A person's civil rights ensure protection from discrimination based on race, gender, sexual orientation, national origin, or ethnicity, religion, age, and disability. While often confused with civil liberties, on the other hand, are basic freedoms outlined in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. When I see this bill, I see for whites only or for colored. If there's more than one opportunity, if there's more than one restroom, I don't see a problem with it. And until recently, anybody who remembers what a, quote, gas station was, when you went to the gas station, there was one restroom. And you either went to that or you didn't go. And I know some people chose not to go. And that's cool too. But what I'm saying is, I hear this bill, and I see for whites only and for coloreds only. And in my mind, in the human race, there is no distinction. That's why I fight for equality for everybody, because I've been discriminated too often, either because I was a woman, because I was black, because I'm a member of the LGBTQ community. Am I emotional about this? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Senator Settlemeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I've been called away. They requested that I go have a discussion to make sure we're not here Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday. In that respect, so I'm going to have to slip out. I appreciate the concept of the bill. I'm trying to wrestle with some of the discussions that are happening here within the committee, because there is no gender on an outhouse. That's just a fundamental reality. However, I've gone to many restrooms where some of these cutesy little signs triggered, going back to my youth, where I could be like your son. No, I'm not going in there, because I think I'm actually going in the girls' restroom, and I'll actually wait till I see somebody else go in and follow him in, and then either I'm following their mistake or I'm not. So if you end up voting this out today, just put me as yet to be determined. Thank you.
Additional questions? Senator Lang.
Thank you. So I wrestle with this a lot because, frankly, we have gender-neutral bathrooms in our houses. And, but I think the difference for me is when I'm on an airplane, I never use the restroom because it's so dirty. When I went to a gas station as a kid, I never used the bathrooms because they were so dirty. But I also think that New York has a law like this. And when I was in New York at the theater, the line for the women's restroom was so long, and people said, well, in New York, you can use the men's restroom, right? And so we all go in there, and there are men at the urinals and the stalls all the women are in, right? And but like Senator Neal said, I think the thing that's troubling to me as a woman is that men get to stand up and use the restroom, and we have to sit down, and they are sometimes so dirty. And in businesses, in our business that I work for, in the men's restroom would qualify under this, the women's would not. But we have someone that comes in and cleans once a day. They clean, and so when I look at the cleanliness factor, they have to go all day till the next day till the cleaners come in to clean the facility. And so as a woman, it takes me back to my early days when I didn't want to use those single stall restrooms because they were so dirty. And I'm kind of tossed because I think even since the pandemic, we're all so concerned. I mean, I'm even more concerned about cleanliness. So I just am wrestling a little bit, and I get this, and I think it's important, but I just don't know where I am right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for the comment, Assemblywoman Peters, for the record. I understand what you're talking about. Even in this building, when the building was a limited capacity, the restrooms were always so tidy. And just opening it up to more folks entering the building resulted in more toilet paper pieces on the floor, more water on the countertops, and we know that that's where germs grow, right? I'm not sure that talking about how we signage a bathroom changes people's behavior in the bathroom. That, again, to the conversation with Senator Pickard earlier, is really a human issue. And I've been in restrooms. Before Starbucks went to a non-gendered model, I went into a women's Starbucks bathroom, and whoa, Nelly. And it was 9 a.m. There was makeup all over the place. There was other stuff on the walls. 9 a.m. I was like, what is going on in a women's restroom? So I understand where you're coming from on the cleanliness side. I also think that that's a practice issue and a human issue, not a signage issue. If we could stop it, I would.
I have a question, and I think this is what I was trying to get at earlier, is that, cleanliness is definitely an issue in public restrooms, and it is not okay to discriminate against people based on their sex or gender identity. But maybe what I'm asking is it okay to discriminate against people based on their inability to follow rules and be civilized? And could you enact a rule that says, if you do not clean up after yourself in this restroom, if we find that you leave this restroom with the seat up, with urine on the floor, with toilet paper on the floor, you don't put your paper towels in the trash can, you will not be allowed to use this restroom anymore? Is there anything stopping businesses from doing that?
Again, Sarah Peters, for the record, as not a lawyer, I would defer to legal.
Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Chair Spearman. For the record, Will Keene, Committee Counsel. All I can do is go back to the language of the bill, which is repeated several times, so we can just look at section 1. It's on page 3, lines 18 through 20. So that's the requirement, that I know it's about the labeling, but it says that you may label it for the use of any person. And even though the focus of this statute is obviously gender, as I read it, it requires the bathrooms to be open to everyone, and you can't differentiate between people using the bathroom. And all I had meant to say earlier is that if someone wants to have lighthearted signage, that's fine, but it can't be used as a subterfuge for keeping certain people out. So if you had a cartoon bear that was obviously dressed as a female and another one dressed as a male on 2 different bathrooms, that would seem like that's a subterfuge for having gendered bathrooms. But you can label the bathrooms however you want, as long as it's clear that they're available for both genders and, in fact, for everyone.
So, Madam Chair, I have a question and hypothetical.
Give me your name.
Sarah Peters, for the record. Thank you. So, in a private business, if their restrooms are publicly available to occupants, people who come in, customers, right, of a private business, could they have the non-gendered bathroom signage, but also say, if you leave our property a disaster, if you don't take care of yourself in our restroom and throughout our facility, you could be, for lack of a better term, 86'd from our business, or not welcome back and escorted out? Or would this bill preclude them from saying that about their restroom?
With your permission, Madam Chair, once again, Will Keene, Committee Counsel. All of this bill does is say that the bathrooms, if they're single stall, if they meet the requirements, if it's a single stall bathroom that meets these requirements and it's open to the public, then it has to be available for any person. Whether you can exclude people from your business, that's, I would have to look into that. That's beyond the scope of this bill. This bill does not require a business to have a public restroom. In particular, if there's another law that requires a business to have a public restroom, then it would have to follow that law. This law only says that if you have a public restroom that is a single stall restroom, it has to be available to all people, and the signage or lack of signage has to make that clear. As far as being able to exclude people from your business, we would have to look into that, and we can, Madam Chair, if you would like.
Thank you, Sarah Peters, for the record. I've been in businesses, right, where they have signs that say these people are not welcome in our business because of past actions. And I think if they can do that for leaving, knocking things over or being inappropriate in the space, that would also pertain to their right to their restroom of their business. But I am happy to follow up on that piece.
Thank you. And I think this is more of a comment that, you know, I also understand the concern of walking into a single-use restroom and it is dirty and it is unsanitary. I just cannot get behind the idea that the solution to that is to say people who are men or look like men or who plan to stand when they use the restroom are not allowed in this restroom. That is not a viable solution to a cleanliness problem. And so I'm trying to think of some very easy and normal ways to address that problem, like putting a sign up that says if you use our restroom, clean up after yourself, or you can only use this restroom if you don't leave it a mess, or this restroom is available to all people who are kind and considerate and who will not leave a mess on the floor. Those all seem like reasonable solutions to the problem of dirty restrooms, excluding people based on their gender identity, family status, or basically what we're saying is what they look like. Because you look like a man, I don't want you entering this restroom before me or exiting this restroom before I enter it. Those are not good solutions to dirty bathroom problems. And so I hope that and I am very confident actually that this law still allows for that. I'm reading the language over and over again, and you know, being a jerk is not a protected class. Being a jerk is also not a crime. So we can exclude people from the bathroom who are jerks and leave it a mess, but we can't exclude people from the bathroom who are, you know, not conforming with our ideals of gender. Thank you.
So I'll just make one more statement. And I said that the discussion has evoked some real emotions for me, painful emotions. And I know the discussion about race, ethnicity, gender presentation, gender identification, all of those sorts of things are uncomfortable. But until we start having those uncomfortable conversations, we will never get truly on the road to being a perfected nation. We're not perfect. We're on the way to perfection. As a soldier, we had gender-neutral bathrooms. You know what they were called? Trees. That's what they were called. When you're in the field and they didn't bring the porta potty, you knew what you had to do. I've also been in churches where they have a sign. I don't know if they have this in men's restrooms, but they have a sign that says, if you tinkle when you sprinkle, please be neat and wipe the seat. I wonder what that meant. Or instructions where or where not to put feminine products after they've been used. So I hear, and please don't anyone think I'm discounting your concerns about clean. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying that for me, if it's an option, then let's try to figure out a way to do it. And the questions that were raised by my colleagues, they're genuine, and what I would ask you to do, there may be some more when we go to public comment, maybe some more, but work with council and see how we can get it there. We won't work session this today. But this bill evokes some very real and painful emotions for me. Very real and painful emotions. And I don't know, there may be one other person, maybe two other people, maybe more, but I don't know. But I represent all three of the people that have been discriminated against. And I ain't gonna choose which one I'm gonna fight for. Anybody in the room want to testify in support of this bill?
Madam Chair and the honorable members of the committee, I am Brian Lee. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators and students for over 120 years. Prior to my current position, I provided pro bono legal services to transgendered individuals seeking accessibility and their ability to be visible in public life. The simple fact is that the lack of adequate gender-affirming restroom facilities prevents individuals from fully participating in civic life. As a practical matter, one cannot go to protests, go to PTA meetings, or seek redress in our courthouses unless adequate restroom facilities are available. This bill takes an important step towards full inclusion. NSCA thanks Assemblymember Peters for bringing this bill, and NSCA and I urge passage of this bill.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Maria Teresa Lieberman Parraga, and I am here with Battleborn Progress. We are in full support of AB 280 and thank the sponsor for bringing this bill. Senator Spearman and Senator Scheibel, when you both gave your remarks, I thought about how I was someone like Senator Hardy, that when I was in high school and college, I worked at cleaning places where they had single-stall restrooms. I had to go into men's restrooms and clean it up. I had to go into women's. I had to go into mixed. And yeah, people can be disgusting. And as Senator Spearman, as you gave your remarks, as you were wrapping up, I just thought my level of discomfort for the cleanliness does not equate the level of pain that just simply not being able to go into a restroom, something so basic, that is much worse. And that's why I urge everyone to support this bill, because we shouldn't be treating people that way anymore. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, broadcast, let's go to the phones.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. If you would like to testify in support of AB 280, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 070. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Spearman and committee. Thank you for this time. My name is Jasmine Margarita Tobin. Jasmin, Margarita like the drink, Tobin, Tobon. I am an organizer with Planned Parenthood Votes Nevada. Planned Parenthood Votes Nevada is in favor of AB 280. While they're a necessity for all people, for gender diverse Nevadans, bathrooms can be a place and source of harassment, policing, bullying, and violence, as we heard today. Not only would a gender inclusive bathrooms provide safe spaces for transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming Nevadans, this bill would also benefit Nevadans with disabilities. Gender inclusive restrooms are helpful for people with a disability or older adults who require assistance from different sex parents or caregivers. AB 280 will help create a safer, more inclusive Nevada all around. Thank you to Assemblywoman Sarah Peters, who sponsored AB 280. And thank you again for this time.
Chair, you have no more callers at this time.
Thank you. Come back here to the room. Anyone in the room in opposition to Assembly Bill 280? Being none, let's go to the phones. Anyone on the phones in opposition to Assembly Bill 280?
Chair, your public line is open and working, and you have no callers at this time.
We'll go now to neutral. Anyone in the room neutral? Let's go to the phones. Anyone on the lines neutral?
Chair, your public line is still open and working, and you have no callers in the queue at this time.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Peters, you want to come back and make some closing remarks? And
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. Sarah Peters for the record. I appreciate the dialogue and discussion this morning about the dynamic scenario we have with public restrooms. I think that this has kind of been an issue for a long time. What are public restrooms? How do we treat them? How do we use them? And how do we allow businesses to operate them? And we have other protections in place, ADA compliance, building codes that exist today. This bill really is about dignity in using the restroom, allowing people in our community to feel like they can use that space in a safe way. Beyond that are human issues that we can't control with this bill. I appreciate your consideration and I hope to earn your support. I know we only have a few days left, so I will attempt to reach out. If we're not able to get there this time around, we will hopefully be able to work towards it over the interim. Thank you.
Thank you. And as I said before, I see it. I'm not going to separate myself. Thank you. And with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 280. And we will open up the opportunity for public comment. Anyone here want to public comment? Do we have anyone on the phones? Public comment.
Thank you, Chair. If you are wishing to speak in public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers wishing to speak in public comment at this time.
Thank you. Just before we end, this weekend we commemorate Memorial Day, and the discussion on rights was not lost on me as a veteran. There are so many people who are not only in Arlington National Cemetery, but in military cemeteries around the country, some of them in a watery grave, and in other cemeteries. And the sacrifice that they made, I hope that we will remember that. And it's not about the barbecues or the gathering and the parties or whatever. It's not about that at all. But if you do that, please remember the sacrifices of our military. And that's one of the reasons I fight so hard for legislation that will help military members, because I don't believe in talking the talk if you don't walk the walk. All gave some. Some gave all. We are adjourned.